Welcome to today's show. My name is Jason Levine, and today we've got Jeff Siebold here with me. And after a fascinating conversation the other day about AI ethics and professional liability, I know our audience is going to have some interesting things to say about your perspective on that. For those of you that don't know, Jeff, you're not just an architect, you're also a fellow of the AIA, which puts you in the top 3% of the architects in the country. But what makes your perspective truly unique is that you're running both sides of the equation. So let's start there. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your unique perspective and how you're running both an architecture and a construction company at the same time?
Yeah. So I'm Jeff Siebold. I've got a practice in Jackson, Mississippi. We work kind of regionally across the Southeast and have over the years. Started the architecture firm about 16 years ago. In the effort of expanding services and adapting to current business trends and models, we started a construction company just a little over 10 years ago now.
So can you give us a specific example of how that dual perspective has changed your approach to either side of architecture or construction?
We've always been very construction minded in what we do in designing and putting things together. We've always been very practical about that. We always spent a lot of time in the field of making sure that what we were designing was getting built correctly and to making sure our clients were taken care of. And so it was really just a natural progression to start the construction company as well for us and what we do. So I've been pleasantly surprised. I mean, obviously there's a synergy between the two, but it's just made a much smoother, less stressful transition. Our clients have enjoyed it a lot more. Got one person to call when there's a question instead of having to schedule a meeting with two or three other people. And so it's been great.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. So, what does it actually look like when you're doing both of them at the same time? Can you walk us through a recent project where you handled both the design and the construction?
Sure. Well, I mean, always the design process kind of usually leads into the construction. There's always that misconception of architecture is, well, what does an architect do? Oh, well, they build buildings. Well, no, we don't. We put the instruction manual together for the buildings for the contractors together. The contractors build, and we're putting that instruction manual together for them to construct by, handling quality standards and all of the things that go into it. So if you think about it, just every room that you're in or every building that you've been in, someone has had to think about where all of those things go that are in that building, from light switches to outlets to furniture layout to placement of the tile on the floor or the wood. And that's what we kind of conceive. And it starts, really, really small and very, very generic, and then moves to the very hyper specific details as we wrap up that design process and hand it over to the contractors to then take our work and build from.
Oh, okay. So, excuse this childlike reference, but you're basically like an architect is the person that writes like the instructions for the Lego book, and then, the person that buys it is the one that actually puts it together.
So a good analogy is I have a large collection of the Lego architecture series here in the office.
And do you guys actually use Legos? Because I know Lego they did released a architecture series.
We don't in particular. Occasionally we do have a couple 3D printers that we use to kind of help clients envision stuff. As we draw in 2D, we're drawing in 3D. We use what's called a building information model program. Puts a full building package together. So we're fully conceiving of the building and are able to show our clients kind of renderings and what it looks like inside their space for either whether it's a high-end residential project or it's a commercial building or commercial office. We're able to help them kind of show what it's going to look like as a finished product very
Oh,
early.
yeah, that's cool. So that dual perspective is exactly why I thought that your insights on AI would be so valuable because you're seeing both the conceptual design as well as the actual boots on the ground side of the implementation. So speaking of AI, I know you've done extensive research for the AIA on this topic for that particular research perspective. What are the biggest trends that you've seen in AI adoption across architecture and in construction?
It's in the news every day, right? So it's a very, very fast emerging technology, and it's scary to a lot of people because they see what it can generate and You type in a few words and it generates an image. And so from our perspective, and when we started this work and looking into it, and there's some other groups that are in the AI now, they're fully looking into this much more in depth than where we started. We used to draw things out on paper. You'd hear this blueprint or that, and you'd see that you can literally go search and look up images of old architecture firms, and there'll be a room of 100 folks in a suit and tie leaning over a table with a drafting board and drawing out plans and putting building sets together. Now it's a much more refined system, and we're working on computers, and it's obviously evolved. We had that same kind of fear as computers were starting, and CAD, computer aided design, was really coming into the forefront in the 80s and early 90s. There was a lot of fear within the architecture community that, oh my gosh, we're going to be replaced and we're going to be out of a job. And how's this going to happen? And this idea that we were going to get to that point, maybe anticipating what AI was potentially going to do, and where we would just push a button and what it would say building or office or doctor's office or living room or kitchen. And while AI has definitely changed some of that perspective on stuff, there's still a gap. I mean, to date, much as I know, no architect has lost their job due to AI at this juncture of where we are. So it's still something that we're looking into and studying and watching the technology as it evolves. But like anything, it's a tool.
That's really interesting. So during our call the other day, you had mentioned that there's a noticeable difference in how the design world is adapting AI versus how the construction world is adapting AI. Can you expand on that gap a bit?
It's an emerging technology. Like I said, we're using it as a tool. And I think a good analogy of this is to think about it from the perspective of construction is 200 years ago or 100 years ago, even really, we had hand tools, a lot of hand tools. And we're early in the stages of implementing electric saws and things. So construction evolved and we became a little bit more efficient because we were able to start adapting and using those tools. So if you just think about it from that rudimentary analogy, that as AI is coming on board, more and more programs are rolling out. There's a learning curve for sure, but there's also this opportunity for us to be more efficient and to start making ourselves more relevant, adapting and using some of these tools as they become available. I think some of the early adaptations of AI in the architecture world were really looking at code review, building code review. I've always referred to building code as like a choose your own adventure type scenario where you pick a path and very prescriptive about what you can or can't do based on this path that you choose to go down. So if you way it's set up and the way that it's thought through, it lends itself very easily to be plugged in to AI, machine learning program and software.
Oh, okay. So do you think that one industry uses it more than the other? Like, do you think architects are using it less than the construction side?
Probably vice versa. If from what I understand and the way that we're using it, I think we're using it for different things within the office as far as, I mean, from the very, very simple mundane to using programs to, I mean, even just some of the known, either whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or some of the other well-known software versions that are out there, we're using it for just to craft an email or, hey, can you just help me refine on the soft skills of this? This is what I want to say. This is what I'm trying to say, but please help me say this better or more concise in a professional email, whatever your prompt ends up being for that. You may go through a couple iterations of it. You definitely are proofreading that to make sure that the intent hasn't changed or the words haven't changed from what you put in there originally to say something like the exact opposite of what you meant. We see that as a really kind of an early adoption phase. I mean, everybody is, again, noticeably scared about some of these things. And as we've talked about it, it's like we've used AI every day and we just really don't think about it from that standpoint, from being in a city or being in a big city or driving on a vacation and literally plugging in a map and saying you want to go to this destination, and by the will of the gods and the will of the AI engine, it gets you there, navigating you hopefully successfully through traffic and roadblocks and obstacles along the way. When you think about it from that standpoint, it is an AI agent that is helping you navigate that. Someone had to think of that code and that program to put you there. So as we start to use more and more tools on that level, gone are the people of my generation that used to print out maps from a website and take those on a road trip. I still remember being a kid and my parents having an atlas in the pocket of the back seat too. Again, all tools. It's just the evolution of a tool does the same thing.
So, what are some of the fears or uncertainties that you're seeing, either that you have or others have seen in the industry about the AI shift?
I mean, obviously the fear is professional, setting up a professional gravestone, talking ourselves out of a job. And that's obviously the biggest fear that people have. We see these image generations and stuff where you just type in a string of 20, 30 words or whatever it is, and you get a picture of a log cabin sitting on a prairie with a river in the background at sunset in winter in XYZ state. Or I want a skyscraper that looks like this, designed in this style in the skyline of Chicago to be fit in this particular spot. Show me what that would look like. We see that and we get scared because it's the end product and it looks great and makes everybody nervous. But to get from that image working backwards to the whole building set, we're obviously not there yet. And while there are some space planning things that are coming out and getting better with different programs that are out there, again, it's still not there yet. And it still requires that human interaction. All of that and those tools that are there are only good as the data sets that it starts with. And that's leads into a whole big rabbit hole of questions and concerns about where that starts.
Okay, so on the flip side, what are you most excited about regarding AI in your industry?
I think when I first started doing this 20 years ago, the stereotype was that when you started out your career, you were going to be doing the most mundane things in the world. You were going to be doing these tiny little details and involved all the things that went around public bathrooms or doors and windows. And you just were sit in a room and that's all that you were going to be drawing and putting together for the design of a building. And now, when you were going to be placing drawings that you do in one program into another program that all puts it onto a sheet, and then you send that sheet to the plotter, the large format printer. Now, a lot of our software programs handle a lot of the mundane. It's called a schedule, is what it is, which is just essentially just a list of details and parts and dimensions and things for those parts and pieces for like a door. Now our software program, our CAD programs build that thing for you. They take care of that kind of mundane thing. And it's all kind of built into the program itself and software itself, where it's managing the scale of the drawing when it goes to a sheet of paper. You don't have to go back and check all those things, and they're just right. So, a lot of those mundane tasks have been replaced. I think we'll see more and more as AI evolves, uh, more of the mundane things that we have to do just being replaced through some piece of software that's able to kind of help answer those questions and put those things out that we have to put out as our part of our the legal term of standard of care of what we have to do as a design professional.
Okay, so now let's get a little more practical about this. And this is what the business leader audience demographic is wanting to hear about. How have these AI trends impacted your daily business operations, and what specific applications are you using?
Sure. We subscribe to a couple different elevated platforms from the free agents that are out there through Google Workspace and Gemini and ChatGPT. And we've got two other different image generating softwares that we use as well on occasion, from Midjourney to Stable Diffusion. We also have used other different platforms and programs to translate meeting minutes and do transcripts from meetings so that we're retaining those things and keeping those records. We found over the years it's important to keep those things and have those notes for reference points when there's an issue or a question, or, did the client say this or did the client say that? Or when they said this, how exactly did they say it? AI has really helped us fine tune those things, because in the past it was literally somebody that would have to sit there and type out that transcript, and it was inefficient, and you didn't do it very often unless you really, really needed it. And you were optimistic and hopeful that you had the right meeting recorded. And when you were starting that transcription, to make sure that you had it all documented and put in the right place. So, you know, programs itself, I mean, we're starting to do more analytics within the company, taking our data sets and points and looking into those things. We're leveraging and looking at it from a marketing perspective, from a scheduling and a planning perspective. We're really starting to input more data into it so that we're getting out more things that are like highly tailored and catered to what we need just to be more efficient. And in some of the research things that we're doing and some of the groups that I'm work with on board level stuff, I mean, literally taken hundreds of interviews over hours, over 10, 15 hours worth of from previous stakeholders within an organization and set of bylaws and some handbooks and some surveys. And we're able to feed all that into AI engine and ask it to look at it and make an analysis. We really crafted and worked on our prompts and asked it to, on a very, very detailed level, to make some analysis and recommendations as far as the evolution of a company would go and ask what it would do, giving it some options and saying, if you don't like these options and you like another one, then please let us know what you think. And feed it in there. And 15 to 20 minutes later, you get this full report back out. Sure, it could have been done manually, it could have been looked at internally, but it probably would have taken weeks, if not months, of time to generate that and to put the thought out on paper. And you've got a 30-page report about what this analysis is and how you should evolve and how you should look at things. Not perfect, but it's a great starting point and at least a conversation generator as well.
Okay, so when you're using AI to transcribe videos and notes and stuff like that, are you at all afraid of the accuracy of it?
Go back and double check a lot of things. I mean, yeah, we find mistakes all the time. It's not perfect. It's only as good as the audio device that's recording what it quote unquote hears. So, but a lot of times we're saving that original audio along with the transcript. So if there is a question mark of did they really say don't do this or do this, and the not part is a question mark of where it heard or somebody coughed or whatever it had interpreted, then obviously the meaning would be A and B and right and left and completely different sides of the equation. We go back and look at that and make sure that that's right. So again, it still requires a set of human eyes. It still requires our own set of human skills to process and look through and to make sure that it's right. But even using synthesized programs that are out now with speaking audio to be able to go highlight a set of text and just say, read this to me. I can't tell you how many emails I've written to where I've thought I'd said something and thought I wrote that back out and then go back and look at it and will have it read back to me and go, wait, you didn't say that. And I will. So it's a great set of tools to have for efficiency as well as for just improving the quality of things that you are putting out the door with your brand and your name on it.
Okay, so it still saves you time even though you still have to go back and double check everything.
Sure. I grew up in a generation of where I had the option of taking a keyboarding class in high school and stuff. I type with about 5 fingers. I will appreciate and accept all the help I can get on that front. So while I'm still pretty fast at it, I still make a fair amount of mistakes. And it's nice to be able to have someone to quickly check behind me, but also for me to have that level of review before I actually hit send.
Okay. So where would you say that your business is currently at when it comes to AI implementation, and what level are you looking to get to?
Right now, as far as the architect side of things, we're in a pretty good spot. We use the tools that we have currently. We're constantly looking and researching into other programs and ideas and things that are out there. So, but I feel pretty comfortable with how we're using it and the ways that we're using it. Construction is generally a slower moving train as far as adaptation of technology and adaptation of change. If to talk about cognitive biases and things, it really establishes on the status quo and it really likes to hang its hat on that. And anytime you implement something new, there's always a question mark of whether it's good or bad. We slowly have worked into different tools and showing our folks that are in the field different ways that they can use AI to help them be more efficient at their job, to help them be more accurate with their job, and just really slowly helping them accept this change and the toolkit that it provides. I mean, just from a simple standpoint of being able to scan a document and look for words. Hey, you're looking for specific information about paint and you don't know where to look for this, and you've got a 500-page document and you need to find all the different sections that refer to paint. I mean, to be able to go and pull that PDF up and to be able to type in paint and have it go search for the 300, 200, whatever it is, 20 instances of where the word paint is used. That's incredibly helpful in time saving. Good resource. We're working on being able to have our superintendents that are on the job sites daily to, they're required to turn in a log and take pictures on a day-to-day basis. And it's always like pulling teeth to try to get them to do that daily log to where now they can literally go speak to Surrey or whatever and have it dictate out their daily log as opposed to having to type it out on a smart or go find their laptop that the battery at the end of the day may have died. So it's all been a great resource for them as far as efficiency and stuff goes. And so we're finding that we're getting more and more data points out of that as far as production and stuff goes, and more tools and more information for us back at the office for us to kind of use for points of analysis.
Oh, okay. So looking ahead, where do you want to be in about like 6 to 12 months from now with technology adoption in both of your firms?
Side of things, I really would like to start looking into more some of the analytic tools and really start digging in a little bit deeper. So where we're working on our efficiencies and kind of letting AI help us make improvements to our construction schedules. So, the way that our industry works is we make our money off a percentage of construction costs and things. So if we're more efficient and can build faster and quicker, then in theory we're more profitable by reducing that amount of time. Some of the things that we've looked into and talked about is adapting that and looking at some of the data points of tracking weather trends and tracking all the data points that weather offers and efficiencies in construction and schedules. So if there are things and improvements that we can make, we see a trend of 2 to 5% or more of schedule reduction because of either rain or I'm in the south, whether it's going to be really hot or really humid or both, which is what the case is typically 6 months out of the year. What can we add to the job site to help make it more comfortable in order to keep the efficiency and the schedule moving forward and not be behind? So all of those things and availability, the more and more data that we control and that we manage and that we know is good, the better our results are going to be from looking at those things. So that part to me has been the most interesting part of all this. Before you kind of had to look at these things and you had to have a pretty high level understanding of math and statistics to be able to make good decisions kind of based on some of the stuff. The stuff wasn't impossible before. It just took a lot of effort to get that data out. And now the right collection of data and the right data sets to start with, you can literally have this information in a matter of minutes that might have taken 2 or 3 hours of data crunching before to get to. And so it just would fall by the wayside and wasn't really considered unless you were a large enough company to be able to have that kind of department and people that could handle it.
Okay, so what do you think that your business does particularly well that AI could potentially enhance rather than replicate or replace?
I think, again, I mean, the analytic side of things, of course, but as far as project scheduling goes, as far as just helping on simple marketing strategies and ways to get our information out there, I think that's all been something that originally we'd have to outsource or we would have to take time away from what we were doing on a regular basis to be able to take on those type of things. Where now we're starting to kind of plug those things in based on this is our past history. This is what we've done. This is some things that we've written. These are some videos that we've been on, interviews. This is my CV. Help me adapt and make a plan for the next 30 days and with a schedule and a chart and prompt of what we would need to do, whether it's social media or it's print or it's a Google ad or whatever. Those things are have been great and very, very helpful for us, especially in our kind of small business that we have where we are. So it's allowed us to be a lot more nimble.
So when your clients are talking about working with you, what's the best thing that they say about your business and what do they value the most?
Well, they appreciate the fact that we're a small business. They appreciate the fact that they can find us and we're approachable. Boutique aspect of what we do is doesn't make us necessarily unique, but it does really help our clients appreciate who we are and what we can offer them. That's just different than from a larger company or a larger perspective where they might be two or three people removed from principal or the person that's producing or putting their things together. So I think that's one thing that really helps and being able to kind of help from a overhead perspective, being able to implement AI for some of these things, it really kind of helps as long as and we keep a good record of our prompts. We keep a good record of what we're doing and the results that we get. That's one thing that I found that's been really, really important. But as we do that, what that does is if there's somebody else on staff that could start to handle these things that maybe doesn't have the experience that I do, we're able to kind of shift that and take that stuff and move that to them and help teach them and educate them on, okay, if I do XYZ, these are the results that I get. And or if I make a shift to this prompt or a shift to this thing, this is the result that I get. And trying to keep those and collect those things together so that they become tools of education has also been something that's really, really important. That's where I would really like us to start looking at more. I think that's only going to increase and improve our client experience.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. So I also wanted to ask about something that you had mentioned the other day about you said that you had to convert about sustainability work in Mississippi and how might AI help you integrate sustainable practices while maintaining the business viability part of it?
Sure. The word sustainability becomes pretty polarizing in our national market. Some areas of the country, it's a mandate and you can't touch a project without making sure that it has some aspect of being sustainable, green, whatever it is. But like many things, it becomes politicized and becomes a charged topic. So we have to learn to adapt regionally to be able to say that, okay, this is a great thing and these are good things and you like these things. You've just been told you don't like it because of the whole political aspect of it all. But if we look at things of like energy independence and we look at things like the freedom of being able to decide who provides your power and how you get your power, or you look that it's more comfortable and it costs you less to operate this building or your house or whatever, those are the everybody likes those things. Nobody generally has a problem with that and nobody pounds their fist on the table and says, "No, I want to pay more money to operate and pay for my utility bill." That's not a common refrain that you would expect to hear from someone. So, one, regionalizing the language and being able to help adapt and move AI is it's a great source for that of just being able to say like, okay, I want to do these things within my business practice or whatever, but I can't sell it if I call it this. So, how can you help me adapt the language to move that? Also, as a toolkit of it's not approachable and you don't understand and you don't know what to do, also one of those things as you work through your prompts and work through things is just to be able to say, I want to be able to do this. And, if you've got some data points about where things are going to fall on ratings or scores or whatever, AI is becoming more and more adaptable. And some programs are coming online too to be able to help you make better decisions when it comes to like material selection or when it comes to the thickness of insulation or the type of material that you might choose. We're becoming more and more savvy as designers and professionals on really using and leveraging AI to kind of help narrow down what some of those decisions might be. Just to, like a hyper specific model would be of I want to be able to find all the construction materials for the over 50% of my construction materials or XYZ project. I would like them sourced within, milled, manufactured within 500 miles of where we are. Please give me a list of available siding material that I could use, or windows, or insulation, or sheetrock, or concrete, whatever it is, you have that ability. And so, from a carbon standpoint, you're reducing that transportation cost, but you're also able to go look into bringing things in and supporting more of a regional economy. I don't want to use the phrase killing two birds with one stone, but you can hit and make a big swing and to be able to knock a bunch of pins off the shelf. I'll put it that way, by being able to start working on your prompts and working through things that way as you're kind of making material decisions or making decisions about a building. You have a way, really move the ball forward in a new way that you could do before, but it took a whole lot of effort to get you to that point. Another problem in recent years through the pandemic and beyond now is supply chain issues. And AI is becoming a better source to help us be able to solve some of those problems from a sourcing standpoint. We're able to kind of look at things and figure that out, or go back to, we've got this, we can't get it for 14 months. What are some alternatives that may be available for us to get, an electrical panel or an air conditioner or whatever quicker? AI has become a toolkit for that as well. And we're starting to see more and more people adopt, and contractors adopt it with that aspect too. So,
Okay. So you had raised, I'm sorry, there's a million things on my screen right now. Let's address the elephant in the room. And this is kind of what I was saying when I said that your perspective is really set apart from all the other AI cheerleaders in the market. What are your biggest concerns about AI in professional practice, particularly around liability when you're dealing with multi-million dollar projects?
so, I mean, it's a great question, and it is the elephant in the room. We don't know what that answer is right now. And one of the fears that we have with AI and AI adoption and stuff, especially as people are learning and trying to become better architects, if they're in their journey of professional development from school to licensure, and they're starting to use AI more, what we worry about is that they miss some of that education part that they would have to get from, like, physically digging in a book and, reading the information. Sure, I can tell you that a countertop typically in a kitchen is going to be 36 inches, but the more and more you go look that up, and the more and more you think it and you do it, then you just start to have that, like, muscle memory. We worry that people are going to be possibly less intelligent by trusting AI more than their own particular professional development knowledge and where it should. So that's number one. But number two on this is, again, we see this in the news. I've seen it twice in the last week of XYZ professional put out this document, and clearly it was generated by AI because there's references that are in it that don't exist, or it is people pleased enough to say, oh, you should go research this and see this person that's done this and put out this paper, and that paper didn't exist. So you've got to be smart enough then to understand and accept the fact that whatever program you use to get that report, they're not going to accept that as their fault. That is, it falls back on the professional and the professional liability of it. The buck stops here. The liability insurance and professional liability insurance that we carry doesn't list Google or OpenAI as liable for anything that we put out, or whatever program it is. And I don't see that it ever will. There's always going to need to be that person that stands behind it that's got to be smart enough to catch those issues and things that come out, but also they've got to be smart enough to know that it's still going to require human eyes behind it. Ultimately, that's the that's the crux of it, and that's where it's always going to have. I went to school for my undergraduate in architecture degree, and then I had to take a series of. I went through a long process. I have to go take 18 hours of continuing education a year to maintain my AIA credentials, and I have to have a number of those to go towards my state licenses. So liability is a big thing. The forward charge of what an architect does is we protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. And that's our first priority in what we do. And so this potentially leads us into the conversation of transparency and who has generated that program and what data sets have they used to arrive at their information. And I think that's the other question that we have and I have about all this is how is that sourced and how do we know that the information that we're getting out of that is primary focused towards protecting the health and safety and welfare of the general public? Because if it's not, and if it's got some other interest in mind, then that's again going to fall back on me. It's going to fall back on my license. It's going to wind us up in a courtroom and knock on wood. We don't get there, but it's a concern that I have people putting too much trust in it, especially in these early days and the early adoption of it. On some of the research models that I talked about earlier, one of the things that we asked it to do was to cite references of like, if you've made a decision based on something that I've fed you from a document, I want you to cite the source. And there were footnotes all through the document. It was the same footnote through the entire document. It had number one, and it referenced one particular interview that we did with one particular subset of stakeholders. That was not accurate as to where it was pulling some of that information from because I knew where some of the information came from other interviews and other stakeholders and other sources, but it's still just people pleasing and whatever else. It went back to that point. So again, you've got to be able to trust your data and you've got to be able to smart enough to know that, like, wait a second, trust but verify, I guess, is probably a better way to say it.
Okay. And you had also mentioned that you're involved in teaching architects and stuff like that.
So I teach a couple different classes with the Association of Builders and Contractors here. So not on the architecture side of things, we do mentor a bunch of young architects. You know, education, some of the stuff that we're doing is associated around junior contractors and trying to elevate the profession on that side.
Oh, okay. So since you had mentioned that there's a lot of things that are helping make the jobs easier, does that mean that your like the curriculum is getting like lighter at all or is less
Uh,
intense?
I would say it's probably the opposite of it, but it's, again, it's kind of back to that whole education thing and having the tools and the knowledge to know the information that you're putting out is correct and right. So you've got to make sure that you have that good set to start with. So, so you got to kind of start with the basics and kind of build up. Tomorrow, I'm teaching a class on job site safety and on interpersonal skills for people that are project managers on a job site, a construction job site. So, and still working through my slides and slide deck and talking points through the latter half of the day, but plan on incorporating some of this research and technology and things that we're using into that class and curriculum. So, really, just from a basic level of stuff, but just kind of the examples that I cited really early in our conversation here about just helping polish up an email or daily logs and job site reports, having using simple basic programs that anybody can put on their smartphone or tablet or laptop. Having that functionality will only improve their job and their skill set. So just using simple programs like, just one that will just double check your grammar and make sure that, you've written an email properly and you have all the articles in the right place and or maybe need to be a little bit more efficient with your sentence structure. All of those things help, especially when you have somebody that doesn't have an English degree or the last English class they took might have been in high school and that might have been a long time ago. Some of these things become intimidating. When I tell our folks in the field, like, hey, I know that you called me about this and we've got this verbal record of it, but I'm going to really need you to put that in an email and send that to the client, or I'm going to really need you to put that in an email and send it to the contractor or subcontractor. And you just see this, like, well, you hear the emotion in their voice when they say, okay. But you also, if you're having this face to face with them, you just see this wave of fear fall over them. AI has given them a new level of confidence and being able to do some of the things that they were very fearful for and taking on in the past. But it's from a standpoint of a liability, it's tracked problems and changes and getting us that written record that we desperately need sometimes, that in the past was a much harder hill to climb.
Oh, okay. So the other day when we were talking on the phone, you had raised some thought-provoking ethical questions about AI decision making. Can you elaborate a little bit more on your concerns about who's pulling the strings and whose interests are being best served?
I mean, yeah, that's the again back to the whole transparency. It's just where's the what's the source of the information that's there? And that's one of the question marks that we have, especially when it comes to design stuff or details of how to put a building together. You have to be able to trust the information and to know where it starts from. And who is deciding that the information that is being fed to the machines is a good data set, or it's a good detail, or it's a good way to do XYZ construction techniques and details change from region to region depending on what our climate is. A foundation detail that I would use in the Southeast is not the same foundation detail that I would do if I was designing a building in Maine or upstate New York or the Pacific Northwest. There's just different concerns involved. And you need to be able to know and to be able to trust that information that comes back out of it to know if it's good. And I don't know that AI is smart enough necessarily to discern that just yet. Obviously, it's only as smart as it's been programmed to be smart. We think of this in simplistic terms of what we've seen in Hollywood or movies or whatever, and that's not necessarily the best place for us to be. So, and it's not necessarily thinking so much on its own as much as it is thinking about what we fed it and who fed it. So we've seen the bias that we've seen sometimes in AI of the results that have come out. If we're talking about three different levels of supervised learning, just to kind of get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of it, if we tell it to go recognize a squirrel and we feed it 1,000 images of a squirrel and different kinds of squirrels and whatever, the AI engine is going to learn that that's a squirrel, and we show it him a squirrel and it's going to be a squirrel. But if you show it a picture of a squirrel that of a different breed that maybe you didn't feed it, or a picture of a chipmunk, it's not going to know what to do with that, or it's not going to know how to handle that. And sometimes I worry about it being people pleasing aspect of it that we hear a lot about, of it just trying to give you an answer. But again, you got to be smart enough to know if it's the right answer or to be able to trust that. The ethical concerns and all that start to come up with where's this information coming from? Did it have the right to use this information? Is this information copyrighted information or proprietary? We haven't really navigated that from a legal perspective just yet, but this ties directly into the liability conversation too, is because different groups and different businesses have different agendas and they have different things that they're charged with within their industry to protect. So, without naming names on stuff, but let's just say an insurance company has a different set of agenda for what they're trying to protect in their world versus what I am trying to protect and do as an architect and a design professional. And sometimes we hope those things align and those ethics align, but sometimes they don't. So I hate to use that as an example of it, but again, it's just something that's always in the back of my mind as we use this and we trust this and we start to trust it more and more to let it do more and more things. We haven't necessarily adopted the code review part of it yet to let AI trust our designs to go check it from a code review. I'm still going back and going to look at that and do that the old fashioned way for now. But as we evolve forward, I worry about trusting too much of it and missing a detail aspect of it. So hopefully it's the best interests of the people are involved, but I've not gone through and read a product statement or haven't signed up for any of those programs. But I can only imagine that the sharp legal minds that we have and these behind a lot of these companies make you sign a pretty extensive waiver of liability that goes along with trusting one of these pieces of software to check your building and to sign off on it that it's correct without going back and doing the manual work that a human takes. It's we talk about this as like the edge conditions, if you will, the things that are kind of outside what the computer is programmed to understand and appreciate. So there's unique situations in every aspect of every building. And so we just want to make sure that we have all those things covered and we understand what all those things are, especially when we're putting our trust in a piece of software.
Okay. So when you're teaching the classes for the Association of Building Builders and Contractors about AI, what questions are you getting and what are contractors most worried about?
Again, I'll use an SAT word of, again, there's in this industry, a lot of times, especially when we're talking about guys that are working up and not necessarily the higher level executives, the word Luddite gets thrown out. They understand that technology exists, but they're really slow to adapt or slow to kind of bring that into their life. You know, some of the younger people I will get some questions about early adaptation of some of these things and can they trust it or can they not trust it? And just even from the perspective as our vehicles get more sophisticated and stuff too, I'll see that, oh, wow, you trust the whatever car company when you press the button and let it drive and take your hands off the wheel, you trust that. I'm not there yet. So it's a slow moving train, but we'll start to see it more and more. Just simple entering a simple term in a browser, you're going to get an AI generated response before you get specific websites and things. I mean, that's an evolution that's happened in the last, what, 6 months or so. You know, as we start to get introduced to it more and more, I think it'll be more and more mainstreamed and more easily adopted and accepted.
Okay. And going back to what you were saying about where it's getting the information from, I personally think that the issue is that it's using the internet and you can't believe everything you read on the internet. So that's really where a lot of the inaccuracies and stuff the AI gets come from. It doesn't know who to trust and what's a credible source versus what's not a credible source.
Sure. And there are groups that are out there within the design world that are creating their own data sets. They're creating collective and making their own data sets and doing research to be able to build these things and work through these things that'll eventually become a product that gets rolled out, a toolkit for other architects, designers, and professionals to use. Again, it's who's deciding that the data that they're even feeding it is good data. I think authors and researchers and people that do this a lot more than I do from a higher level of education standpoint are basically telling us that you're okay. I know this is scary and whatever, because we see in the news that, oh my gosh, that, you just feed it a few information, you give it a picture, and Google will generate this video of you now, and you've got to worry about a deep fake. You got to worry about this and you got to worry about that. And we see it evolve so quickly, it becomes very, very scary again, because we're kind of creatures of habit and we like the things that we know and we know our world really, really well. So when something change comes along, it it's scary. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background here at the office, so I'm shooting a text to someone in the office so they can go take her out.
Okay. Now there's a couple of straightforward questions. There's like four of them. Starting with from your AIA research perspective, what should other architects and contractors know about AI that they might not be considering?
Again, it's a tool. So, and understanding that that tool is out there and that tool is not going away. I was having a conversation with someone this morning and they asked and said, "Oh, you need to work on this, you need to do this and whatever." And I just use the adage of, while I don't feel old every day, I know that I'm past a certain round number that would classify me as old. If I was 25 years old, I would say, yes, he's old. So the old dog and new tricks thing, in order to maintain your relevancy in this profession and just got to stay more current in things. And you've got to understand that and adopt and be able to plug these things in where you can. So, one of the aspects and things that we're looking at from an industry perspective, from an architect standpoint, is we are really working on our education models to make sure architects understand what's out there. And as fast as AI is moving and evolving, it's one of those things that we're constantly having to look at it and evaluate it to be able to keep that content fresh. If I'm relying on a program from 2 years ago or even a year ago that's saying, oh, well, look, this is how you do this, 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 and this, and this program, and whatever, like there's probably five other programs that have come out since that point that do it 10 times better than what we're trying to educate. So, kind of keeping up with trends. And there's some magazines are doing a really, really good job of keeping up with what's happening in this world, kind of keeping up with what's going on in the technology. And some are keeping up with here's what's happening from this development standpoint and what to look forward in the next few months to be able to forecast. So that's the biggest thing to consider and to think about as we go through this. I mean, if it was an architect that believed in drawing by hand and pencil and pen and with a drafting board, and then that's fine. But as you start to see architects adapt the computer and CAD software, and even when CAD software saw it, it was just an evolution of drawing up lines on paper. Now, when we conceive of a model or we conceive of a design or a drawing or whatever, we're building and drawing and building components. So I'm not just drawing a line for a wall and then making a parallel line multiple times to show you what that sandwich of a wall looks like. I'm actually physically drawing with that wall. So you've just got to learn and adapt and be a little bit more flexible and less rigid in the way that you think about things. I think it's really important to just be able to understand your comfort, but understand that you've got to kind of keep one foot or at least one thought forward enough out of your comfort zone
Okay.
to remain relevant.
So another thing that you had mentioned was that business consultants should be worried about analytical compatibilities with AI. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I kind of say that tongue in cheek on stuff, but just, I mean, really into the example I cited before of where we talked about the feeding it a bunch of different documents and transcripts and interviews and polls and whatever data points that you can feed into it, that ordinarily the traditional business consultant would have to go look at that and have that and be able to generate this report of like, and think through it, of this is what you need to do and this is why you need to do it. And it would take you several weeks to get that information back and a lot of back and forth. And it was very expensive. And it wasn't something that was accessible financially to a lot of different companies. And now with a simple $20 subscription a month, you kind of have access to at least the start of that information and the start of that report and maybe a different thought process. And we were having a conversation yesterday about that with another group that's doing a similar research. And we cited the example of like we were having this conversation back and forth with the AI agent of just like, okay, well, what if I feed it this? And what do you think about this result? Play devil's advocate. Does this make your argument stronger or does it make it less weak, or do you change your mind? And really starting to have that kind of back and forth for $20 a month as opposed to $500 an hour is, I mean, that's apples and carburetors, right? From a business management perspective. So again, you got to be able to trust that data and have somebody smart enough to know that it's right or good or that it's kind of leading you in the right direction. But it's only as good as what you're feeding it, and it's only as good as what you're telling it and how you're telling it to learn. So I would think that in the next, I know there are classes that are out there now too, but on literally instead of like an English class as a freshman 101, we may have an AI engine prompt writing class of this is what and how you should look at these things and work through them. I don't know. That to me makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. What's your advice for firms that are hesitant about adopting AI tools versus those that might be moving too fast?
It's like anything in any new technology. It's treading the waters that you feel comfortable with. But you definitely have to start kind of treading in a little bit of the water to see what's out there. So you've really got to start looking into these things, making sure that it's the right fit and run it through whatever your own level of comfort is and your own level of testing is. So as you're exploring and looking into these things, it can be scary as a lot of new things are, but as long as you take the time to do it and you're not wasting a client's time and you don't just, hopefully no one's not smart enough to be able to throw something out there without looking at it and testing it. We all get in a rush and a bind and, oh my gosh, I just got to do this and get this out. I'll fix it later, kind of a thing. But you hope that people understand the danger and the aspects of doing that. So as you, the larger firms and things that are out there, you just got to make sure that the checks and balances are really in place. So I think it just was literally last week where judge on the federal level issued an opinion out and obviously clearly hadn't read it and hadn't double checked the things that were behind it and the information that was in it. And it was just, it was wrong. If it's going to make the news at that point, that's not necessarily the press that you want. So I don't think anybody wants to be on that side of an article, that side of honestly a court case. What is real implication of that? So as you're moving faster or maybe too fast in it, just knowing what information is coming out is anything to take away from all of that. It's great for a way to play devil's advocate and to look at a few things, but it is very people pleasing on a lot of the stuff that it does too. That's something that is not one of the best things of AI.
Okay, so now how do you see the legal and regulatory landscapes evolving to catch up with AI technology in professional practice?
I know the lawyers are looking at it. I know that they're thinking through it. Again, it's technology's moving so fast, it's really hard to keep up with it. Again, I think we've still got the human factor and our insurance policies and our professional liabilities. They stop with the human, they stop with the company. I think that's where you'll start seeing more professional associations starting to issue statements on how to handle AI and position. Medical Association has put papers out on it. The Bar Association has put stuff out. You'll start to see AIA pushing policies out on it as well. But then you'll start to see this on the state level for state licensure and state professional boards as well. You'll start to see statements coming out on that. And it's just one more thing and one more aspect of our professional lives as well, professionals that we have to stay on top of and make sure that we understand what the words that they're saying and the policies that they're putting out there, what those actually mean to the development of our work and the products that we put out.
Okay, so now going back to what you were talking about earlier with your goals on what you're trying to achieve with AI, from a personal perspective, why does getting the balance between the AI matter to you? And what's driving your passion for responsible AI?
I think the efficiency aspect of it is important. I think really appreciating the fact that I'm not looking to replace employees. I'm not looking to replace people that do things. I am looking for efficiencies in their job and I'm looking for efficiencies in what they do as I run my business or businesses. And so, that's really, really critical. That is first and foremost. If something's going to take more time and more effort and it's harder, then that's not a smart adoption of technology, in my opinion. If you've got to go spend, I used the example years ago of I had an employee and I asked him to just make a phone call and talk to a product specialist about XYZ product. I said, call them, tell them what we need, tell them that we need to know how this is supposed to get put together. And I need a specification and warranty information and all this other stuff for this particular product. And I ran to a meeting and was out and came back like 3 hours, 4 hours later. And I went to that employee. I was like, hey, where's that information? We need it so we can finish that up today. And he said, well, man, he did not call them. And he went and searched the internet high and low to try to find that information for hours, as opposed to making that simple phone call that would have solved the problem and answered the question and we could have moved on to other things. It was that the technology was there, but of the internet and all the wealth of information that was out there, but yet we couldn't necessarily find it. We weren't able to use that tool properly. So it was very, very inefficient. So I draw that parallel to AI at this point to say that, like, okay, well, it's great, but if it's taking you more time and effort to do what you're trying to do and trying to achieve, then let's move on, or maybe we need to talk about some practice or talk about a different way to solve that problem, or take a step backwards and go back to where we were doing it before. So that's where we are. I'm interested in the new technology and stuff as it comes out, but like everything, I want to be cautiously optimistic about how it works. At my personal threshold for accepting new subscriptions and new subscription based business planning, unless there's a good justification for it and understanding of it. One more thing to manage in that overhead column that just never seems to stop. Understanding and making sure all of that, if this is the right tool in the right time, what are we putting in place, and or is this one new tool that we're going to do replace three other tools? That's another aspect here of just really understanding what we're doing, how we're doing it.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up now, it's been very incredibly insightful. So for somebody listening who's running any type of business, and trying to figure out their AI strategy, what's the most important thing or things that they should keep in mind?
I think it's one of those things you kind of have to start slow. Most things start with baby steps into things and wading into the water. Don't walk into the big water and hip deep if you can't swim. So just be careful, navigate these things that you feel comfortable with, and you have the toolkits to be able to know is right and to be able to push those things forward. I don't think avalanche is the right way to say it. All these analogies and things exist, snowball down the hill or whatever. I think you'll find that it's been helpful, and there's other simple things that are out there. I think there's plenty of people that resist and want to resist this aspect of trusting the robot overlords of crafting things and putting things out there. But just this past weekend, I was working with my son on some school planning stuff and just said, well, let's just start here as a starting point. Let's just see if we can help craft this schedule to figure out how we have to solve this problem because school's starting in 10 days and we need to have a kind of a daily game plan of getting to the finish line of whether it's summer reading or a particular project he was working on for a class that had some summer work involved. I think those are is it perfect? No, but it's a starting point, and sometimes just being able to get started is the hardest part.
Okay. And then people who wanted to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, so got our phone number there below. We've got a couple websites for architecture firm is at Siebold studio.com. And our construction company is at the number 5 build.com. Those are two great places to start on LinkedIn and all the other channels as well. So the good news is with your last name is Siebold, you're not too hard to find. So I think there's only a couple of us, Jeff Siebold's across the country that I'm aware of. So that's a good place to start.
Okay. One thing I forgot to ask about was in terms of customer service and stuff like that. Have you tried adopting anything to manage that side of things, give people answers to questions immediately and stuff like that in the initial phases of the sales process?
We have not looked into that. I will say that there's been an uptick of what I will say is emails and things that have come through lately of that fraud's not the right word, but
Spam?
waste of time. Spam for one, sure. That's going to be always a problem. But people that are inquiring about a project that is not real, hasn't reached the level of scam. It definitely has those feelers of it being a scam. It's just more of a waste of time. So more of a, hey, we want to talk about this building and I've got this piece of property and can you design this and how much would it cost? And where those emails and inquiries of, yeah, if you would just give me a call and let's schedule a call to talk, that would be great. And you just get like, oh, well, I'm in a spot where I can and I've just got to email you these things. And they don't answer that part of it and just keep emailing you back. And you grow a sense to understand that those things are potentially scams or a waste of time. But then again, stranger things have happened. So you kind of have to go down that rabbit hole a little bit just and hope that you don't end up wasting too much time and doing the investigation side of things that are obviously not real. So, we have an auto attendant that answers the phone and still have our voice over IP system, which cut down on a lot of the solicitation calls and things. But we have not looked into the auto attendant and or chatbot stuff of
Oh,
just
okay. Speaking of email, the email part, there's one tool that I had been interested in for quite a while that could actually possibly solve that issue, Sales Ape AI, which is specifically for emails. It'll like automatically respond to your emails and stuff like that for you and like, try and qualify the people before you actually like jump in. So that could actually probably help you not like completely avoid it, but kind of filter it out a little bit.
sure. No, those, and I keep getting ads for plenty of these other things that have big promises of cutting down the litter or at least filing those things away. So I just, as the weekly spam list comes out of hey, double check these things and make sure that there's not a client or a weird email in there that you needed to get that got filtered. And there's still plenty of ways and things that get through it too. So it's a battle, and I think that at some point I will probably get to the point where I've looked into that enough that it's that I will trust it enough. But that's one of those things too that I'm just that level of comfort of just making sure that we're accessible and that something's not getting caught that shouldn't that should have made its way through. So
Okay. So that's just about all of the questions that I had for you. Is there any last things that you wanted to say before we close out?
no, I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It was very valuable for everybody.
I look forward to the conversation.
You too.